What she threw away made me famous.
The anniversary gift hit the bottom of the kitchen trash can with a metallic thud that might as well have been my heart breaking. 20 years of marriage reduced to garbage. I don't want handmade junk, Nick. Vanessa didn't even look up from her phone as she said it. Her manicured fingers scrolling through what I assumed were work emails. It was always work emails these days. I told you I wanted something real for our anniversary. Something that shows you actually care. I stared at the silver bracelet I'd spent 3 weeks crafting in my basement workshop. Hand-forged links, each one shaped and soldered with the precision I'd learned from my old mentor, each curve designed to catch the light just right. The clasp alone had taken me 6 hours to perfect. That bracelet is worth more than your car payment, I said quietly, watching her reflection in the kitchen window. She was beautiful still, my wife of 2 decades. But there was something cold in her eyes now that hadn't been there when we were young and broke and happy. Vanessa finally looked up, her green eyes flashing with irritation. Worth what? Nick, you make jewelry in our basement and sell it at craft fairs. Don't pretend you're Tiffany. I teach art classes 3 days a week, I corrected, though she knew this. And I run a custom jewelry business, a successful one. She laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Successful? We're living paycheck to paycheck while my sister's husband just bought her a BMW for their 10-year anniversary, a BMW, Nick. There it was. Brent Harris, my brother-in-law, the golden boy lawyer who'd married Vanessa's younger sister Claire 5 years ago. Everything in our house had become a comparison to Brent, since he'd made partner at Morrison, Klein, and Associates, the same firm where my wife worked as a senior associate, climbing her way up the corporate ladder, 1 billable hour at a time. Brent makes 3 times what we make combined, Vanessa continued, standing up and smoothing her pencil skirt. He understands what it means to provide for his family. We don't have kids, Vanessa. That's not the point. She grabbed her briefcase and car keys. The point is ambition. The point is wanting more than this. She gestured around our renovated row house in Federal Hill, the home we'd bought together when Baltimore was still affordable, the place where we'd planned to raise children who never came. I watched her leave, heard the front door slam, listened to her Audi start up and pull away. Then I walked to the trash can and retrieved my anniversary gift. The bracelet was undamaged. I'd built it to last centuries. I guess love really is garbage day on Wednesdays. But as I held that bracelet up to the morning light streaming through our kitchen window, something shifted in my chest. Not heartbreak this time. Something harder. Something with edges. If my wife wanted to throw away 20 years of marriage, if she wanted to treat my work like trash, then maybe it was time she learned what trash really looked like. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Frankie Morrison's number. Frankie owned the Artisan Gallery in Fells Point, and he'd been trying to get me to do a solo show for months. I'd always said no, preferring the anonymity of craft fairs and online sales. But anonymity wasn't going to teach my wife a lesson. Frankie, it's Nick Landry, about that gallery show you mentioned. I'm ready. 3 weeks later, I stood in Frankie's gallery watching him hang my piece in the front window. The bracelet looked different under the professional lighting, more substantial somehow. The placard beneath it read, "Useless gift for my wife, by Nicholas Landry. Price, $10,000. You sure about this price point? Frankie asked, adjusting the display stand. He was a thin man in his 50s with paint-stained fingers and the kind of artistic credibility that came from 30 years in Baltimore's art scene. I mean, it's beautiful work, but 10 grand is serious money. It's what the piece is worth, I said. The materials alone cost $800. That's hand-forged sterling silver with genuine sapphire inlays. The technique is called repousse. It's a lost art. There are maybe 50 people in North America who can do this level of metalwork. Frankie nodded slowly. And your wife threw it away? Garbage day, I confirmed. Said she wanted something real. Jesus! He stepped back to examine the display. Well, if someone's stupid enough to throw this away, they deserve whatever's coming. The opening was scheduled for Friday night. I'd made sure to time it perfectly. Vanessa always worked late on Fridays, usually until 8 or 9. The gallery opening started at 7. I spent the week preparing, not just mentally, though there was plenty of that. I spent Tuesday morning at the courthouse filing paperwork, Wednesday afternoon at my lawyer's office, updating documents that had been gathering dust for years, Thursday at the bank, making transfers that should have been done months ago. Vanessa noticed none of it. She was too busy with her big case, the Morrison Industries merger, that was apparently going to make or break her career. She left early, came home late, and spent most of her time on phone calls with colleagues, including Brent. I wasn't spying exactly. But when your wife takes hour-long phone calls in the bedroom with the door closed, and when she laughs in ways she hasn't laughed with you in years, you start to notice things, like how she'd started wearing perfume to work again, like how she'd bought new lingerie but I'd never seen it, like how she'd suddenly become very interested in working weekends. Friday evening arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Baltimore beautiful. I dressed carefully. Black jeans, white button-down, the silver cufflinks I'd made for myself last Christmas. Artist casual, but respectable. The gallery was packed by 7:30. Baltimore's art scene wasn't huge, but it was tight-knit and gossipy. Word had gotten around about the piece in the window, about the story behind it. I'd been careful not to name names, but in a city this size, it wasn't hard for people to figure things out, especially when my wife walked through the door at 8:15 with Brent Harris on her arm. They made a handsome couple, I had to admit. Vanessa in her black cocktail dress and pearls. Brent in his expensive suit with his lawyer's confidence. They looked like they belonged together in a way that Vanessa and I maybe never had. But the look on Vanessa's face when she saw the bracelet in the window was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning this moment. "Oh my God," she whispered, loud enough for half the gallery to hear. "Oh my God, Nick," Brent squinted at the placard. $10,000? For that? "That's the bracelet I threw away," Vanessa said, her voice rising. "That's my anniversary gift." The conversations around us started to die down. People were listening now, sensing drama. "You threw away a $10,000 bracelet?" Brent's voice carried that lawyer's projection, trained to fill courtrooms. "Are you insane?" "I didn't know it was worth—" Vanessa caught herself, looked around at the faces watching us. "Nick, we need to talk, now." "I'm mingling," I said pleasantly. "It's my opening night." "Your opening night?" She looked around the gallery like she was seeing it for the first time. "This is your work? All of this?" The walls were covered with my pieces. 20 years of metalwork from my earliest crude attempts to the sophisticated jewelry that now sold for thousands online. Necklaces, rings, sculptures, decorative pieces. A lifetime of craftsmanship that Vanessa had dismissed as basement hobbies. "Some hobby," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Patricia Wells, the art critic for the Baltimore Sun. She had her notebook out and was studying the window display with professional interest. "Mr. Landry, could I get a quote about the inspiration behind this piece?" Vanessa's face went white. "Patricia, hi. I didn't know you'd be here tonight." "Vanessa, how nice to see you. I was just asking your husband about this fascinating piece. Useless gift for my wife. There's obviously a story here." I smiled at Patricia, then at my wife. "It's exactly what it sounds like. I made it for our 20th anniversary. My wife felt it wasn't good enough, so she threw it away. I decided maybe the art world would appreciate it more." "She threw it away?" Patricia's pen was moving across her notepad. "A $10,000 piece?" "She didn't realize the value," I said charitably. "My wife works in corporate law. She's more comfortable with things that have obvious price tags." Brent stepped forward, his face flushed. "Now wait just a minute." "Brent Harris," I said, extending my hand. "Good to see you. How's Claire?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Brent was here with my wife, not his own, at night, at an art gallery opening that definitely wasn't a work function. Patricia's pen stopped moving. She looked from Brent to Vanessa to me, and I could practically see the story writing itself in her head. "I think we should go," Vanessa said quickly. "Actually," I said, "I think you should stay. Enjoy the show. See what 20 years of marriage looks like when it's properly displayed." That's when the photographer from the city paper showed up. The camera flash caught Vanessa mid-grimace, standing in front of the window display with her mouth open and her eyes wide with horror. Brent was in the background, looking like a man who just realized he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Perfect," the photographer said. "Could you move a little to the left, ma'am? I want to get the price tag in the shot." Vanessa fled, literally ran from the gallery, leaving Brent to chase after her in his expensive shoes. I sold 6 pieces that night, including, to my absolute delight, the bracelet. A collector from D.C. paid the full $10,000 cash. The story ran in 3 papers over the weekend. Local lawyer throws away husband's $10K anniversary gift. The city paper went with trash day treasure when love goes to the dump. Patricia Wells wrote a thoughtful piece about the undervaluation of craft artisans and the disconnect between artistic worth and commercial recognition. All three papers included the photo of Vanessa looking horrified in front of my display. By Monday morning, it was viral on social media, and that's when things got interesting. Vanessa didn't come home Sunday night, or Monday. Her sister Claire called Tuesday morning screaming at me over the phone about how I'd humiliated the family, how Brent was furious, how I'd destroyed Vanessa's reputation at the firm. She's staying with us until this blows over, Claire informed me, and Brent says you could face a lawsuit for defamation. Defamation? I was in my workshop, putting the finishing touches on a new series I was calling Domestic Bliss. I never mentioned your husband's name, or Vanessa's for that matter. Everyone knows it's her, the whole city knows. That's not my fault, I just titled my artwork honestly. Claire hung up on me. I wasn't worried about a lawsuit. Brent might be a good corporate lawyer, but I'd been careful. Everything I'd done was legal, if not particularly kind. And I had bigger concerns than my sister-in-law's wounded pride. Like the fact that my wife had been systematically trying to destroy my business for the past 6 months. I'd discovered it by accident, while going through our joint credit card statements for tax purposes. Vanessa had been disputing charges from my online customers, claiming fraudulent transactions. She'd filed complaints with my payment processor, alleging that I was running a scam operation. She'd even reported my workshop to the city as an unlicensed business, forcing me to spend 3 days and $500 getting permits I'd already had. Death by 1,000 cuts, designed to make my hobby too expensive and troublesome to continue. But Vanessa had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated both my intelligence and my connections. Marty Kowalski had been my partner when I was still a Baltimore cop, back in the 90s, before a back injury forced me into early retirement. He'd gone on to make detective, then retired himself 5 years ago to start a private investigation firm. We'd stayed friends, drinking buddies who met every few months to complain about our wives and reminisce about the old days. Marty had always been the better investigator. "Your wife's been busy," he said, sliding a manila folder across the table. We were sitting in Murphy's Pub, our usual spot, surrounded by the comfortable darkness of a place that understood men and their problems. 6 months of systematic sabotage, very professional, very careful. She's smart. Not smart enough, I said, opening the folder. She left a paper trail. That's not all she left. Marty took a sip of his beer. Nick, I gotta ask, how's your marriage been lately? I looked up from the documents. Why? Because your wife's been spending a lot of time with her brother-in-law. And I mean, a lot of time. The photographs were professionally taken, time-stamped, undeniable. Vanessa and Brent entering the Marriott downtown at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, leaving separately 2 hours later. Vanessa and Brent having dinner at Primo's, the kind of intimate corner table you reserve for romance, not family meals. Vanessa and Brent in his BMW, parked behind the office building at 10 p.m. on a Thursday, engaged in activities that definitely weren't work-related. How long? I asked. Best I can tell, about 8 months. Started around the time of Claire's birthday party. I remembered that party. Brent had been particularly friendly, asking about my work, seeming genuinely interested for the first time since I'd known him. Vanessa had been glowing, happier than she'd been in months. I'd thought they were finally warming up to me. There's more, Marty said gently. Financial stuff. Your wife's been moving money around. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger bank alerts. But it adds up. She's building a nest egg. For what? Divorce, probably. She's getting ready to leave you, Nick. And she's planning to take as much as she can when she goes. I closed the folder and finished my beer. Around us, Murphy's continued its nightly ritual of drowning sorrows and celebrating small victories. The Orioles game played silently on the TV above the bar. Life went on, indifferent to the collapse of my marriage. What do you want to do? Marty asked. I thought about it. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of building a life together, of supporting each other through good times and bad. 20 years of love and trust and shared dreams. All of it thrown away like a piece of handmade jewelry. I want to file for divorce, I said. But first, I want to make sure I'm protected. Marty nodded. I know a guy. The guy was Thomas Chen, a divorce attorney who specialized in protecting assets from vindictive spouses. He was expensive, but Marty vouched for him, and after the gallery opening success, I could afford expensive. The good news is that Maryland's an equitable distribution state, Chen explained during our consultation. The bad news is that your wife's a lawyer, so she knows how to hide assets and manipulate the system. What about my business? That's where things get interesting. Technically, anything you created during the marriage is marital property. But if you can prove that your wife actively sabotaged the business, tried to destroy its value, then you might have grounds to claim it as separate property. I handed him Marty's folder. Will this help? Chen flipped through the documents, his expression growing more interested with each page. Oh yes, this will help very much. We spent 2 hours going over my options. By the time I left Chen's office, I had a plan. Step 1 was protecting my assets. Over the next week, I quietly moved my equipment out of the basement workshop and into a storage unit rented under my brother's name. I transferred my business accounts to a new bank, established new payment processing under my LLC, and moved my inventory to Frankie's gallery for safekeeping. Step 2 was documentation. I printed out every email, every bank statement, every piece of evidence that showed Vanessa's systematic campaign to destroy my livelihood. I made copies of everything and stored them in 3 different locations. Step 3 was timing. I waited until Thursday morning when I knew Vanessa would be at the office, when I knew Brent would be in court, when I knew the maximum number of people would witness what happened next. Then I had the divorce papers served. At Morrison, Klein & Associates, during the weekly staff meeting, by a process server who had no idea he was about to detonate a nuclear bomb in Baltimore's most prestigious law firm. Vanessa Landry, the young man's voice carried across the conference room. I have documents for you. Vanessa's face went through several interesting color changes as she read the papers. Around the conference table, her colleagues pretended not to stare while absolutely staring. Brent, I was told later, looked like he was going to throw up. But the real fireworks started when Vanessa got home that night. She came through the front door like a hurricane, screaming before she'd even closed it behind her. You bastard! You complete pathetic bastard! I was sitting in the living room reading a book, waiting for her. Hello, Vanessa. How was work? She threw her briefcase at me. I ducked, and it hit the wall behind the couch. You served me at work, in front of everyone. I thought you'd want to handle it professionally. Don't you dare! She was shaking with rage, her face flushed, her carefully styled hair coming undone. Don't you dare pretend this is about professionalism. This is about revenge. Revenge? I closed my book and looked at her calmly. Vanessa, you've been sabotaging my business for months. You've been stealing from our joint accounts. You've been sleeping with your sister's husband. I'd say divorce is a pretty reasonable response. The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Vanessa laughed. It wasn't a nice sound. Prove it, she said. Prove any of it. I smiled and reached for the manila folder on the coffee table. Funny you should ask. The photographs hit the coffee table like a deck of cards being dealt for the highest stakes game of our lives. Vanessa's face went through a spectacular range of emotions as she saw herself and Brent captured in high-definition infidelity. Where did you get these? Her voice was barely a whisper. Does it matter? I leaned back in my chair, watching her world crumble in real time. The question is, what are we going to do about it? She picked up one of the photos, the 2 of them kissing in his BMW behind the office building. This is illegal. You can't spy on people. Actually, I can. You're in public places, no expectation of privacy. My PI was very careful about that. Your PI? She looked up sharply. You hired a private investigator? Marty Kowalski. You remember Marty? Used to be my partner back when I was a cop, before I became a basement hobbyist. Vanessa sank into the chair across from me, still clutching the photograph. Nick, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain 8 months of systematic sabotage? Can you explain why you've been disputing charges from my customers, filing false complaints, trying to destroy my business? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Bank records don't lie, Vanessa. Neither do email trails. You've been very thorough, I'll give you that. Very professional. But you forgot that I used to be a cop. I know how to investigate. She set the photo down carefully, her lawyer's training kicking in. What do you want? I want a divorce, clean and simple. You keep your retirement accounts, I keep my business. We split the house proceeds 50-50 and we both walk away. That's it? That's it. She was quiet for a long moment thinking. I could almost see the calculations running behind her eyes, weighing options, looking for angles. What about Brent? She asked finally. What about him? Are you going to tell Claire? I considered the question. Claire had always been nice to me in that polite way that in-laws manage. She didn't deserve to have her marriage destroyed because her husband was a cheating bastard and her sister was a vindictive witch. But then again, she didn't deserve to live a lie either. That depends, I said. On what? On how cooperative you are with the divorce, and on whether Brent decides to make trouble for me. Vanessa nodded slowly. He won't. Make trouble, I mean. He can't afford to have this come out any more than I can. Good. Then we understand each other. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, trying to regain some dignity. I'll have my lawyer contact yours tomorrow. Already done, Thomas Chen. He's expecting your call. She paused at the living room doorway. Nick? Yeah? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About the bracelet. About all of it. I looked at her standing there. My wife of 20 years. The woman I'd loved since we were kids. The person who'd become a stranger without me noticing. No, you're not, I said. You're sorry you got caught. She didn't argue. After she left to stay with Claire again, presumably, I poured myself a scotch and sat in the quiet house thinking about the past 8 months. All those late nights, all those weekend work sessions, all those times she'd been too tired or too stressed or too busy for anything resembling a marriage. I'd thought she was just ambitious. Turns out she was just planning her exit strategy. The next morning, my phone started ringing early. First, it was Claire, crying and screaming alternately. Then it was Brent, trying to sound reasonable and lawyerly while clearly panicking underneath. Then it was Vanessa's mother, who'd somehow heard about the divorce and wanted to know if there was anything she could do to help us work things out. I let them all go to voicemail. But when Frankie called, I answered. Nick, you need to get down here, now. What's wrong? Just get down here and bring your lawyer. I found Frankie standing in front of his gallery, staring at the broken window where my display had been. Glass covered the sidewalk, sparkling in the morning sun like scattered diamonds. When did this happen? Sometime last night. After midnight, the cops think. Frankie kicked at a piece of glass. They took the bracelet. Security camera across the street caught 2 people, man and a woman. Can't make out faces, but the guy was tall, wearing a suit. I didn't need to see the faces. I knew exactly who had broken into Frankie's gallery. Did they take anything else? Just the bracelet, left everything else alone. This was personal, Nick. Thomas Chen arrived 20 minutes later, followed by the police. Officer Martinez took our statements while Chen examined the damage and calculated liability. The good news is that your homeowner's insurance should cover the piece, Chen told me. The bad news is that this looks like witness intimidation. Can we prove it? Not without better video. But it establishes a pattern of harassment. That'll help in divorce court. The police finished their report and left. Frankie started calling a glazier to replace his window. Chen went back to his office to file motions. And I went home to plan my next move. Because if Vanessa and Brent thought they could intimidate me with amateur hour breaking and entering, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I've been a cop for 15 years before my injury. I dealt with pills dealers, gang members, and stone-cold butchers. I'd testified in court hundreds of times, faced down defense attorneys who made Brent Harris look like a public defender. My wife had forgotten who she was married to, but I was about to remind her. The plan came together over the next few days. It was elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its execution, and completely legal. Everything Vanessa had tried to do to me, I was going to do to her, but I was going to do it better. Step 1 was her reputation. Vanessa had built her career on being the reliable one, the steady hand, the lawyer who never made waves or caused problems. She was up for partner next year, a promotion she'd been working toward for a decade. That promotion required a spotless record and the unanimous approval of the senior partners. I started with social media. Nothing obvious, nothing that could be traced back to me directly. But Baltimore's legal community was small and gossipy, and rumors had a way of spreading. The story of the thrown-away bracelet had already made the rounds. Now came the whispered questions about Vanessa's judgment, her stability, her personal life. Was she really partner material? Could the firm trust someone who'd publicly humiliated herself over a piece of jewelry? Step 2 was professional. I had Marty make some discreet inquiries about the Morrison Industries merger, the big case that was supposed to make Vanessa's career. It turned out there were some irregularities in how the case was being handled, some corners being cut that could cause problems down the line. Nothing illegal, but nothing that would look good in a bar association review either. Step 3 was personal. I waited until Friday night, when I knew Vanessa and Brent would be together, when I knew they'd be feeling safe and confident. Then I had them followed. Not by Marty this time. By a whole team of investigators, photographers, and legal observers. Professional-grade surveillance, the kind that costs serious money but produces courtroom-quality evidence. By Sunday morning, I had enough documentation to destroy both their careers and their marriages. But I wasn't going to use it. Not yet. First, I was going to give them a chance to do the right thing. I called Brent's office Monday morning. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. "I don't think that's a good idea." "I think it's a very good idea, unless you'd prefer to have this conversation in front of Claire." There was a long pause. "What do you want?" "Lunch. Murphy's Pub. 1 o'clock. "Nick." 1 o'clock, Brent. Don't make me come looking for you." He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His usual lawyer's confidence was nowhere to be seen. "You look terrible," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "What do you want, Nick?" I signaled the waitress for a beer, then leaned back and studied my brother-in-law. He was a handsome man. I'd give him that. Tall, well-dressed, successful, the kind of man who'd never had to fight for anything in his life. "I want you to stop," I said simply. "Stop what?" "Stop sleeping with my wife. Stop breaking into art galleries. Stop pretending you're some kind of criminal mastermind when you're really just a corporate lawyer having a midlife crisis." Brent's face flushed. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photograph from the weekend surveillance. Him and Vanessa entering a hotel in Annapolis, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing. "Saturday afternoon," I said. "The Westin, room 412. You stayed for 3 hours." He stared at the photo like it might disappear if he looked hard enough. "How did you—" "I used to be a cop, remember? I know how to investigate, I know how to gather evidence, and I know how to destroy people who cross me." The waitress brought my beer. I took a sip and waited for Brent to process what I'd just told him. "What do you want?" he asked again, quieter this time. "I want you to convince Vanessa to sign the divorce papers without a fight. I want you to stay away from my business, my friends, and my life. And I want you to think very carefully about whether your marriage to Claire is worth throwing away for a woman who treats anniversary gifts like garbage." "And if I don't," I smiled, "then Claire gets copies of all the photos. So does your boss. So does the Bar Association. So does the Baltimore Sun." Brent went very pale. "You wouldn't." "Try me." He was quiet for a long time, staring into his untouched beer. Around us, Murphy's continued its lunch rush, oblivious to the life-changing conversation happening in the corner booth. "She's going to leave you anyway," he said finally. "With or without me. Your marriage is over, Nick." "I know," I said. "But that doesn't mean you get to walk away clean. So what's the point? Why not just let it all come out?" I considered the question. It was a fair one. Why not just burn everything down and let the pieces fall where they may? "Because I'm not a vindictive person," I said. "I just want my life back." Brent laughed bitterly. "You're not vindictive. You humiliated Vanessa in front of the entire city. You had her served at work. You're blackmailing me right now." "I'm protecting myself. There's a difference." He finished his beer and stood up. "I'll talk to her." "You do that." He was almost to the door when he turned back. "Nick, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. About all of it." I looked at him standing there, my brother-in-law of 5 years, the man who'd stolen my wife and tried to destroy my business. "No, you're not," I said. "You're sorry you got caught. Just like Vanessa." The divorce papers were signed on a Thursday morning in Thomas Chen's office. Vanessa sat across from me at the polished conference table, her signature neat and precise on every page, her face giving nothing away. She'd lost weight over the past month. Her cheekbones were sharper, her eyes harder. The woman I'd married 20 years ago was completely gone now, replaced by this stranger in an expensive suit who treated our marriage like a business transaction to be concluded. "The house goes on the market next week," Chen said, reviewing the final documents. "You'll split the proceeds after realtor fees and closing costs. Mrs. Landry keeps her retirement accounts and her car. Mr. Landry keeps his business assets and his car. No alimony on either side." Vanessa's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Morse, nodded approvingly. "My client is satisfied with these terms." "And my client is satisfied as well," Chen replied. Just like that, 20 years of marriage reduced to a legal document and a handshake. Vanessa gathered her papers and stood to leave. At the conference room door, she paused. Nick? Yeah? I hope you find what you're looking for. I already did, I said. Self-respect. She left without another word. I thought that was the end of it. I thought Vanessa would disappear into her new life with Brent, that they'd move somewhere far away and leave me to rebuild in peace. I was wrong. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later when Frankie called me in a panic. Nick, you need to get down here. Now. I was getting tired of that particular phone call. What's wrong now? Just get down here and bring that lawyer of yours. I found Frankie standing outside his gallery again, but this time there was no broken glass. Instead, there was a crowd of protesters carrying signs that read, "No more violence at home. Stand with survivors and boycott toxic art." What the heck is this? Your wife, Frankie said grimly. Or your ex-wife, I guess. She's been telling people you're controlling, that the whole bracelet thing was psychological torture, that you're a dangerous man who uses art to humiliate women. I stared at the protesters, most of whom looked like college students and professional activists. They were chanting something about toxic masculinity and artistic violence. This is insane. It gets worse. She's got a restraining order. Says you've been stalking her, threatening her. The cops were here an hour ago asking questions. My phone rang. Thomas Chen. Nick, we have a problem. Your ex-wife is claiming you violated the terms of your divorce agreement by harassing her and her family. She's filed for an emergency hearing. That's impossible. I haven't even seen her since we signed the papers. She's got witnesses, her sister, her brother-in-law, colleagues from work. They're all saying you've been following her, calling her, showing up at her workplace. I felt the ground shifting under my feet. Chen, I haven't done any of those things. I believe you, but we need to prove it. Can you account for your whereabouts over the past 3 days? I thought about it. I'd been home mostly, working on new pieces, trying to process the end of my marriage. I'd gone to the grocery store, stopped by Murphy's for a beer, visited my brother to update him on the divorce. Nothing that would provide an alibi for specific times and dates. This is a setup, I said. Probably, but it's a good one. Your ex-wife is smart, Nick. She's playing the victim card, and she's playing it well. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the next morning. I spent the evening with Chen, going over my options, trying to figure out how Vanessa had managed to turn the tables so completely. The restraining order is temporary, Chen explained. But if the judge makes it permanent, it could affect your business, your reputation, everything. And if she can prove harassment, she could reopen the divorce settlement. She can't prove something that didn't happen. She doesn't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. This is civil court, not criminal. She just has to convince the judge that it's more likely than not that you're harassing her. I went home that night feeling like I was trapped in someone else's nightmare. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, was about to be destroyed by lies and manipulation. But as I sat in my empty house, drinking scotch and staring at the walls, something occurred to me. Vanessa was smart, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd forgotten that I was smart too. The hearing was in Judge Patricia Harlan's courtroom at 9 a.m. I arrived early with Chen, watching as Vanessa's legal team set up their presentation. She had 3 lawyers now, including Patricia Morse and 2 associates who looked like they'd graduated law school yesterday. Vanessa herself looked perfect. Vulnerable but strong, professional but feminine. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. A navy blue dress that was conservative but flattering, minimal makeup, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. She was playing the role of the mistreated ex-wife to perfection. Judge Harlan was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from 30 years on the bench. She'd seen every scam, every lie, every manipulation that desperate people could devise. "Miss Morse," she said, "present your case." Vanessa's lawyer stood and launched into a carefully crafted narrative of psychological mistreatment and post-divorce harassment. She painted me as a controlling husband who'd used art as a tool, who'd publicly humiliated his wife, who couldn't accept that the marriage was over. Then came the witnesses. Claire testified that I'd been calling the house at all hours, demanding to speak to Vanessa, making threats. Brent claimed I'd followed him to work, confronted him in the parking garage, made veiled references to consequences if he didn't stay away from my ex-wife. 3 of Vanessa's colleagues swore they'd seen me lurking outside the law firm, watching the building, taking photographs. It was all lies, but it was convincing lies. delivered by credible witnesses who seemed genuinely concerned for Vanessa's safety. When they were finished, Judge Harlan looked at me with obvious skepticism. "Mr. Landry, how do you respond to these allegations?" I stood up, my heart pounding, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the rest of my life. "Your Honor, I'd like to present some evidence." Chen handed me a manila folder. Not the same one from before, but a new one, compiled over the past 24 hours by Marty and his team. "These are cell phone records," I said, distributing copies to the judge and opposing counsel. "They show that I made no calls to my ex-wife's sister's house on the dates in question. In fact, I made no calls to anyone in the Harris family at any time after the divorce was finalized." Claire's face went pale. "These are credit card receipts and security camera footage showing my whereabouts during the times when witnesses claim I was stalking my ex-wife's workplace. As you can see, I was at Murphy's Pub on Tuesday evening, having dinner with my brother on Wednesday, and shopping for groceries on Thursday morning." Brent was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. "And finally," I said, "these are phone records and email logs showing that my ex-wife and her witnesses have been coordinating their stories, rehearsing their testimony, and planning this entire charade." I handed Judge Harlan a transcript of text messages between Vanessa and Claire, discussing what they would say in court, how they would present their testimony, what details would be most convincing. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Harlan read through the documents carefully, her expression growing darker with each page. When she finished, she looked up at Vanessa with the kind of stare that could melt steel. "Miss Landry," she said quietly, "do you have anything to say about this evidence?" Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I'd known her, she was speechless. "Your Honor," Patricia Morse said desperately, "we weren't aware of this evidence. We need time to review." "No," Judge Harlan said firmly. "You don't get time to manufacture more lies." She turned back to Vanessa. "Miss Landry, you are an officer of the court. You took an oath to uphold the law and serve justice. Instead, you've used your legal training to orchestrate a campaign of perjury and fraud." She paused, letting that sink in. "Not only am I denying your request for a restraining order, I'm referring this matter to the State Bar Association for disciplinary action. I'm also holding you and your witnesses in contempt of court." The gavel came down like thunder. "Furthermore," Judge Harlan continued, "I'm awarding Mr. Landry attorney's fees and damages for this frivolous lawsuit. You'll be hearing from the court about the amount." Vanessa's legal team was scrambling to pack up their papers, whispering frantically among themselves. Claire was crying. Brent looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But Vanessa just sat there, staring at me with something that might have been respect or hatred. It was hard to tell the difference. As we left the courtroom, Chen was practically bouncing with excitement. "That was beautiful," he said. "Absolutely beautiful. How did you know they were coordinating their stories?" "Because I know my ex-wife," I said. "She's smart, but she's also controlling. She couldn't resist micromanaging every detail of their testimony." "And the phone records?" "Marty's been monitoring their communications since the divorce was filed. All legal, all admissible. We just had to wait for them to incriminate themselves." Chen shook his head in admiration. "You should have been a lawyer." "No thanks," I said. "I prefer honest work." We walked out of the courthouse into the bright morning sun. The protesters were gone, probably moved on to some other cause. The world looked different somehow, cleaner. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You win, but this isn't over." I showed it to Chen. He frowned. "We should report this to the police." "No," I said, deleting the message. "It's over. She just doesn't know it yet." But I was wrong about that too. 3 days later, I got a call from my insurance company. Someone had filed a claim against my homeowner's policy, alleging that I damaged their property during a domestic dispute. The claimant was Vanessa Landry. The alleged damage was to a $10,000 bracelet that had been destroyed during our divorce proceedings. She was trying to collect insurance money on the same bracelet that had been stolen from Frankie's gallery. The same bracelet that she'd thrown in the trash. The same bracelet that no longer existed because she and Brent had broken into the gallery and taken it. It was fraud, pure and simple. And it was the mistake I'd been waiting for. The insurance fraud investigation took exactly 1 week. I spent those 7 days watching my ex-wife's life collapse in slow motion, like a building being demolished floor by floor. It started when the insurance investigator, a thorough woman named Detective Sarah Mills, reviewed the claim and immediately spotted the inconsistencies. How could Vanessa be claiming damages for a bracelet that had been sold at a gallery opening? Why was she filing the claim 3 months after the alleged incident? And why were there no police reports or documentation of this domestic dispute? Mills called me on Tuesday. "Mr. Landry, I need to ask you some questions about your ex-wife's insurance claim." "I figured you would." "She's claiming you destroyed a bracelet worth $10,000 during an argument. Is that accurate?" "No, I made the bracelet. She threw it away. I retrieved it and sold it at a gallery opening. The buyer paid cash. I have receipts. Can you prove the sale?" I could. I had photographs from their gallery opening, the bill of sale, even the newspaper articles about the event. I had witnesses who'd seen the transaction, bank records showing the deposit, documentation that would make any insurance investigator's job easy. "I'll need copies of everything," Mills said. "I'll have them to you this afternoon." Wednesday, Mills interviewed Frankie about the gallery opening and the subsequent break-in. She also spoke to Patricia Wells, the art critic who'd written about the event, and to several gallery patrons who'd witnessed the sale. Thursday, she reviewed the security camera footage from the break-in, the same footage that had been too grainy to identify faces for the police report, but was apparently clear enough for an insurance investigation with better equipment. Friday, she called Vanessa's office to schedule an interview. Vanessa lawyered up immediately, which was smart, but also suspicious. Innocent people don't usually need attorneys to talk to insurance investigators. The following Monday, Mills called me again. "Mr. Landry, I'm closing this case. Your ex-wife's claim has been denied, and I'm referring the matter to the district attorney's office for prosecution." Prosecution? Insurance fraud is a felony in Maryland. Filing a false claim for $10,000 carries a potential sentence of 5 years in prison. I sat in my kitchen, holding the phone, trying to process what I'd just heard. Vanessa, who'd built her entire career on being the reliable one, the ethical one, the lawyer who never cut corners, was about to be charged with a felony. "There's more," Mills continued. "The security footage from the gallery break-in is clearer than the police initially thought. We can identify both perpetrators. Your ex-wife and her brother-in-law are going to be charged with burglary as well." "When?" "The arrest warrants will be issued this afternoon." I hung up and sat in the silence of my empty house, thinking about the past year. The thrown bracelet, the gallery opening, the divorce, the fake harassment claims, and now this final, desperate gambit that had backfired spectacularly. Vanessa had always been too smart for her own good. The arrests made the evening news. Prominent Baltimore lawyer charged with insurance fraud. The story had everything local media loved: scandal, betrayal, the fall of respected professionals. Brent's arrest was even more dramatic. The police found him at Morrison, Klein and Associates, leading him out in handcuffs while his colleagues watched from the windows. The firm issued a statement that afternoon, suspending both him and Vanessa pending the outcome of the criminal charges. Claire filed for divorce the next day. I probably should have felt sorry for them. 24 hours earlier, they'd been successful professionals with bright futures. Now they were unemployed, facing felony charges, and looking at the destruction of everything they'd worked to build. But I didn't feel sorry for them. I felt free. The trial took place 6 months later. I testified about the bracelet, the gallery opening, and the break-in. Frankie testified about the theft and the insurance claim. Detective Mills testified about her investigation and the evidence she'd uncovered. Vanessa and Brent's lawyers tried to paint them as victims of a vindictive ex-husband's elaborate revenge scheme. They argued that I'd manipulated events to frame innocent people, that I'd used my police background to manufacture evidence. It might have worked if they hadn't made one crucial mistake. They put Vanessa on the stand. She was brilliant, as always, articulate, composed, convincing. She told a story about a controlling husband who'd used art as a tool, who'd publicly humiliated her, who'd driven her to desperate measures in self-defense. She was so convincing that I almost believed her myself. But then the prosecutor asked her about the text messages. "Miss Landry, did you send a text message to your ex-husband after the contempt hearing saying you win, but this isn't over?" Vanessa hesitated. "I don't recall." "Let me refresh your memory." The prosecutor handed her a copy of the phone records. "This is from your cell phone to his cell phone, 3 days after Judge Harlan held you in contempt. Do you see it?" "I see it." "And did you then, 3 days later, file a fraudulent insurance claim against your ex-husband?" "The claim wasn't fraudulent." "Miss Landry, The bracelet in question was sold at a gallery opening. We have photographs, receipts, witnesses. How can you claim it was destroyed in a domestic dispute? Vanessa's composure finally cracked. He humiliated me. He destroyed my reputation, my career, my marriage. He deserved what, Miss Landry? The courtroom was dead silent. Vanessa looked around, realizing what she'd just said, understanding that she'd confessed to filing the claim out of revenge rather than legitimate damages. Nothing further, the prosecutor said. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. Vanessa got 3 years in prison, suspended to 18 months with probation. Brent got 2 years, suspended to 1 year with community service. Both were disbarred and ordered to pay restitution. I was in the courtroom when the sentence was read. Vanessa looked at me across the room, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 20 years ago. Young, vulnerable, scared. Then the moment passed, and she was led away in handcuffs. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, breathing deeply for the first time in months. My phone was buzzing with calls from reporters, friends, family members who'd followed the case. I ignored them all. Instead, I drove to Murphy's Pub, ordered a beer, and sat in the comfortable darkness, thinking about the future. My business was thriving. The publicity from the trial had brought in customers from across the country. The house had sold for more than asking price. I had enough money to buy a new place, start fresh, build whatever life I wanted. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy. My phone buzzed with a text message. This time it was from Frankie. Gallery opening next Friday. Your new collection. Justice served. You ready? I smiled and typed back, ready. The new pieces were my best work yet. 20 sculptures exploring themes of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. The centerpiece was a life-sized figure of a woman throwing something into a trash can, titled, What Goes Around. The opening was packed. Baltimore's art scene, media, and curious onlookers all came to see the work of the man who'd become famous for turning his divorce into performance art. I sold everything the first night, including What Goes Around, which went for $25,000 to a collector from New York who said it was a masterpiece of contemporary social commentary. As I watched the buyer arrange shipping for the sculpture, I thought about Vanessa, sitting in her prison cell, probably reading about the opening in tomorrow's newspaper. I wondered if she finally understood the value of handmade art. Probably not. But it didn't matter anymore. I'd won, and more importantly, I'd learned something valuable about myself. I wasn't the passive, accommodating husband who'd let his wife walk all over him for 20 years. I was someone who fought back, someone who won, someone who turned trash into treasure and revenge into art. The gallery was closing, the last customers heading out into the Baltimore night. Frankie was counting receipts and grinning like a man who'd just made a fortune. So, he said, what's next? I looked around the empty gallery at the blank walls where my sculptures had hung, at the space that would soon hold someone else's dreams and ambitions. I'm thinking about a series on new beginnings, I said. Fresh starts, second chances? Sounds perfect. I walked out into the cool night air, breathing deeply, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, the gallery lights went dark. Ahead of me, the city sparkled with possibilities. 20 years of marriage were over. The rest of my life was just beginning. And this time, I was going to live it on my own terms.